It is football and other F words. My name is Zach Lyons. You follow me on Twitter at FWordsPod. You can find all my writing at Stacking the Inbox at stackingtheinbox.com. I just kind of like, I don't have a Twitter handle. Then that's Mike Herndon at Mike Herndon NFL. He has a piece up talking about today over at paulkaharski.com, talking about all the different draft picks, division. Apparently, he needs to go to the fucking eye doctor because he's had real hard time seeing the vision. Maybe he's like a man wandering aimless in a cave without a torch, just trying to find his way out. That's what it kind of feels like for Mike. Just falling further and further into the abyss with every passing minute on the draft clock ticking down. He is with the fans now. He is just down there in the bleachers, just with you bleacher creatures who don't understand anything about what this team is doing. Hey, guess what? But we're brought to you by Bluegrass Beverages, who put on a hell of a party for the draft festivities, the opening night. I had one of the worst hangovers that I could not shake. Like, it got so bad for me, Mike.
Was that still from the... Was your hangover yesterday still from that?
No.
Okay.
That was me not learning my lesson on Thursday.
Okay.
But on Friday, worst hangover. It got so bad because I'm not a guy who can nap. Can you nap?
Not really. I have to be very exhausted to nap.
Yeah. So I couldn't nap. And I was like, I've tried the Bloody Mary. That ended up in the toilet. That didn't work. I've tried all kinds of different packets. Nothing was making me feel good. So I literally put on YouTube on our big screen, sleep meditation. And me and Huxley like conked out for an hour. That nap saved my life. And I had to go through all that because of Bluegrass Beverages slinging drinks like crazy for the draft party. Thanks to everybody who came out. We had a blast, had some great coverage, some surprises, some close calls. All in all, it was a great draft night. And that takes us into, we're just going to jump right in. Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville, by the way, liquor store. Go get all your liquor, all your alcohol over there. That brings us we're just going to jump right into the draft. And, maybe we'll get to the Corey Davis stuff and everything. But as you can see, the UK flag is hanging. I felt like I needed to do something a little bit extra because I said that there's no way that Mike Vrabel would like Will Levis and that he would be a Tennessee Titan. I just feel like he would be a butthead. And we'll talk about Will Levis later and how some things of my perception of him have changed and how other things haven't. That's going to be a big chunk of the show. So let's talk about all the other picks. We'll kind of like save Will Levis in the middle and have a big, long discussion. The first domino to fall was Peter Skoronski. I've since being removed from the draft, I want to know two things. Do you think that it's okay to take a guard? Because that's essentially what we both believe he is. Regardless if they play him at tackle, we both think he's a guard. And do you think that was the best and most obvious pick at 11? Because I am at yes and yes.
I will still stand on I would have preferred Jackson Smith and Jigba at 11. And look, I get the concerns with the hamstring. I do. I think his upside is much higher from a value standpoint. Now, I think Skoronski's got upside as a guard is about as high as you could possibly have for a guard. But I just think a star wide receiver, which is what I think Jackson Smith and Jigba can be, is much more valuable to a team than a star guard. So that's really what it comes down to. But I was not upset at all. Like, of the options available on the board, Skoronski would have been my second favorite choice because of all the players in the draft. And I think this draft was extremely light on true blue chip, like can't miss type talents. And look, even the NFL draft has taught us over the years that even the guys that we think are can't miss, there will be a few misses in there, right? But Skoronski to me is like the safest pick in the whole draft because he has basically an impeccable history, like zero injury concerns, did not miss a single game at Northwestern. It was a 3-year starter, started literally from the day he stepped on campus as a true freshman, which is super hard to do at left tackle in the Big Ten. played well as a true freshman at left tackle in the Big Ten, played better as a sophomore, played even better as a junior. His junior year had allowed 6 pressures and 1 sack all season. Basically just sparkling record. Grandfather played in the NFL, family that understands what that is, and by all accounts, that like superb personality, superb character. Everything is A pluses across the board with him. Except that he has 32-inch and a quarter arms, and that's the one reason that he wasn't going to go in the top 10. Because if he did, he would have probably been picked top 5, given his pedigree. So, to me, it's a great value pick where they got him. I think he's one of the best players in the class from just a pure football player standpoint. So I'm totally happy with that pick. It's kind of just it's a in the gap double. Like, it probably not a home run, but it is a clear double, and you're going to have a really good offensive lineman on your team for the next 10 years.
Well, don't you think that if he is a multi-time Pro Bowler, a All-Pro, he reaches a second contract, doesn't that all kind of make it a home run? I mean, like, I know that that's what you need, right? Like,
yeah.
Here's my thing. Greg Rosenthal put it best because he's a big time professional, but this is the kind of been what my mind has gone to. The Eagles' biggest lesson, this is from today. If you want great line play, commit massive resources to them every single year. Most teams talk about prioritizing the trenches, but don't act on it. It's funny. It's always funny that the most analytics-driven team in football loves big dudes the most.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, if he's an all-pro, I get that the ceiling and the sexiness is not there for Peter Skoronski as far as, he's not going to be catching a lot of touchdown passes and, breaking ankles and all. Well, he may break a few ankles, but he's not going to be doing anything like super exciting. But if he is an all-pro, a stalwart on this offensive line, you're talking about allowing like less than 2 sacks per year. That is all pretty sexy, worth it stuff. And you talk about the true blue chippers and the guys that have the least amount of flaws. I mean, it's like Will Anderson. I'd almost throw Devon Witherspoon in there, and it's Peter Skoronski. But to me, it's like Peter Skoronski and Will Anderson, and they're the least sexy, or I guess you would say, like, top of this draft, the least sexy players that play at the highest level every single Sunday. Like that to me is a little bit is why I've kind of come around to it, because we just talked about how this offense couldn't do anything because of the offensive line. And theoretically, we'll get to what Aaron Brewer said and all these other guys said about the offense in general, but and what Aaron Brewer said about that little fella that used to coach. To me, it makes so much sense that this was the pick, and this was probably outside of maybe a defender like Will Anderson or Jalen Carter, and obviously C.J. Stroud. I only think there was like 3 people above Peter Skoronski on their big board, if even that. It could have just been C.J. Stroud 1, Peter Skoronski 2.
Yeah, it could have been. I totally buy that. But yeah, I think he's a great pick. And I mean, speak for yourself on guard not being sexy. I mean, nothing will bring you to climax quite like a well-executed reach block. I mean,
hey, let me tell you something. Now. This man did not come to the NFL draft, whether he was invited or not. I'm not really sure, but he didn't go. He chose to spend it at a Chicago pizzeria, drinking beer, eating pizza. I'm in. Like that had me right there. But also, like, how, and it's a common theme among this draft class, in my opinion, is that, like, how you get kind of like how Roger McCreary is. He's a smart, intelligent kid, obviously, but he's just not a good public speaker.
Yeah.
These guys are all really good public speakers. Specifically
Skoronski.
I was shocked.
Impressive. Yeah. His interview, when they first introduced him, when he came to Nashville and he had the press conference in person, so blown away by like how impressive he is, just confident, like immediately just seemed like extremely comfortable in front of the media and talking on that stage, which is impressive for a young guy. I mean, again, like three-year college kid.
Well, he's only the 21. Videos of him like meeting everybody and how like outgoing and like he just kind of felt like he already fit in, right? Like, I mean,
his vibes are 100% of Vrabel guy, by the way. Like I feel like he's going to be the guy that like you know how Vrabel loves to fuck around with Luan and Compton and all that. I think he is going. Skoronski will eventually be that guy, whether he has his own podcast or whatever. In
Skoronski
10
may
years,
be fucking around with Vrabel at some point. Like, I mean,
yeah, that's true.
I feel like he's like the energy of Taylor Lewan with the intelligence of Ben Jones. Like, if that makes sense. Like, I feel like he's like the best of both those guys combined into one. And I just, I have really high hopes for it. And I think that it's got a trickle down effect to it because this team just, like I said, I know the wide receivers suck. And we're going to talk about how much the wide receivers suck, even though I'm kind of sick of talking about how much the wide receivers suck because guess what? Nothing's going to change. But I kind of feel like the way that the offense is moving, it was really important to get athletic, explosive, pass blocking linemen that can get out into space. And they've been telling us that this whole fucking year. And they've told us that about with their actions. And now the players are talking about it being put into action. This is a really, really good pick. Now, it's the first domino to fall in a weird draft of what we realize that the Titans are going to do from here on in. We have figured out their draft strategy. Now, we have not figured out their big board, but we have figured out at least their draft strategy. So,
and I think we figured out generally where they're going, right?
Yeah,
like, I think we know now, that's why the second round, it just took me a while to like get to where I was like, what are they doing here? Like, what is the goal? Where are they?
You started coming around with the Josh Weil pick. The Josh Weil pick, it took you there.
It kind of brought me back a little bit because I don't know that. I mean, we'll get into the Levis thing.
Yeah, I think we both agree that the strategy was odd, but the vision to me is clear. I don't agree with really either, but I at least to me, it seems like our GM, because there's been this weird discourse on Monday that the GM and the head coach aren't on the same page because of the Carthon. He got a little sensitive in his britches about and started crying about people asking tough questions, and then Vrabel's later's like if this is if draft day is their best day of their career, then they're not very good players or whatever he said. And people think that means they're not on the same page. When if you look at this entire fucking draft, it's obvious. First off, who is pulling the strings? And second off, that they're completely on the same page. So we're going to skip Will Levis. I am sick and tired of people saying that the Titans drafted an injured/hurt running back. He is not currently injured. He is not hurt. He plays with a tad bit of discomfort, but there is nothing health-wise that is wrong with him currently that's going to prevent him from being out there when, I guess, rookie mini camps this Friday or next Monday. It's coming up and participating in those. So I just wanted to say that. I did not like the discourse around Tyjae Spears because everybody's mad that they didn't take Tyler Scott, which I get it. I am with you. Tyler Scott was up on my big board higher than Tyjae Spears. But there was all kinds of weird discourse that really just kind of shit on Tyjae Spears, the prospect. And he's been one of my favorite guys from the get-go. He's amazing. He's awesome. He's everything you want. I know the shelf life isn't there. And you talked about today, I think you kind of came around and let it settle in that, okay, well, this guy's really fucking good. And we're talking about right now how much Derrick Henry's getting paid and why he's on the trade block and why they can't trade him and why they maybe should cut him and do that because he got a second contract and got paid and that because of restructures is now a ridiculous amount of money for a running back. And here we are. Like, this is the plan. It's to draft explosive playmakers that are fast. And if that running back's not here by the time that his second contract's rolling around, that's probably okay.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that it's probably unfair that a lot of the discourse has gone straight to the knee situation. Although I do think it's because
pertinent.
it was brought up on the broadcast, and that was really the first time I think anyone found out because I didn't know pre-draft that he did not have an ACL and that his knee was like
you weren't in the chat, but we had talked about it in our group chat a couple weeks ago. But we didn't know
that he'd torn it twice, but I didn't know that he didn't have that
came up. Bob McGinn's article had it in there about the running
Okay.
backs on golongtd.com on their Substack. And then I read it somewhere else. I think he actually said it on the podcast that was talking about him tearing nose ACLs, but we never got the podcast episode of whatever it was. It was the day that it was brought up that he tore his 2 ACLs in our particular group chat. There was no clear that it was based off a podcast tweet where Tyjae Spears is talking about it, and nobody could really figure out anything. And then we figured out that it was in high school in 2015. Then he tore it in 2020. And apparently it's not a new thing, but it's not a well-known thing that apparently you don't have to have an ACL if you don't want to. And apparently the repercussions are kind of the same. And the the rate of re-injury is no different than if you get reconstructive surgery. It's a really odd thing.
Yeah, I found an article that was helpful from, I think it was a physical therapist that I posted in my article on paulkarski.com today that talked about what they call them as ACL deficient copers, which is apparently there's a small subsect of the population that is capable of functioning without an intact ACL. Like there is something with the structure of his bones and I guess just anatomy around his knee that makes it possible for his knee to be stable without an ACL, whereas most people are not capable of doing that. So I'm less concerned, honestly, about the lack of ACL than I am about the lack of the cartilage loss and the arthritis, because those are conditions that Jay Ajayi and Todd Gurley dealt with in their careers. And
okay, so
look, I mean,
real quick on this. So
yeah.
Dr. David Chow, Pro Football Doc, he put out a tweet that says now reports a full thickness cartilage loss.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That is the end stage of arthritis. So like that is the same, that thing is tied together. So like it's
Right.
not the full thickness cartilage loss is arthritis, and arthritis is full thickness cartilage loss in this stage of, I guess, rehabilitation or whatever it may be, which would explain why his knee is not unstable with his ACL tear, not having ACL. Arthritic knees with bone spurs are rarely unstable, can play in NFL, but will have a very short career.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where you need to set the expectation is that, look, and this is okay, right? Because we've all harped on it for many, many years, or at least most of us have. And look, Derrick Henry was an exception. We talked about that the time that they signed him to the extension. But most of the time, in most cases, you do not want to be paying a running back on a second contract. And to me, Spears is fine because you don't want to pay a running back on a second contract. I think you can quibble
like
whether
paying Aaron Jones and Dalvin Cook a second contract is a worse decision than the Titans actually paying Derrick Henry, because Derrick Henry is an entirely different species of running back compared to those two. And Tyjae Spears is closer to them than he is Derrick Henry in all sorts of fashion.
So I would not run out and buy a Tyjae Spears jersey.
Don't buy any jerseys from this draft class.
But you could buy a Skoronski jersey. That's safe.
Yeah.
I think. But I would say he's probably here for a short period of time, which to me says Derrick Henry is not going to be back in 2024. Like this is it. This is your farewell tour for Derrick Henry. You're going to hope that he hits the 10,000 yard mark, which I think he needs like 1,665 yards, I believe, to get there. And the 100 touchdown mark, which he needs, I think, 19 to hit those. But I think that this is it. I think this is the end. I think after that, it's going to go to Tyjae Spears and maybe Haskins and like a, running back by committee look for 2024 and beyond. But I think this is the end of the road for Derrick Henry, because otherwise it makes no sense to spend a third round pick on a guy that's going to get, 10 snaps a game for the next 2 or 3 years, to me.
I mean, obviously. And I think he's going to be used a lot more than what people think. And I think, one of those instances, I think this, how we kind of always begged for like someone to be on the field with Derrick Henry at the same time. That was like, why don't you have Dontrell Hilliard and Derrick Henry out there? Why don't you have Dion Lewis and Derrick Henry out there? Or what about when Darrington Evans and Derrick Henry are out there? I think this is like that guy, because I was actually surprised in the press conference when they said that they believe he's an every down back. Now, I thought that he could be an every down back because I view him in the same light as like a Tony Pollard. I thought the Aaron Jones comp was a really good one. I hadn't thought about that one that you had. Some people are, of course, have to go like big old reaches. Lauren just got home, so the dogs are like probably fucking gonna go crazy here in a second when they see her.
Elijah Mitchell was another one that I kind of
I almost put
see.
their
I think he's
RAS up there. He's a little bit more athletic and he's bigger, but Tajay Spears is actually heavier, which was I thought was odd.
I think Spears is more quick and Mitchell's more fast.
Yeah.
So I don't know that stylistically they're that close,
but he's a guy that can be split out wide, and he is a guy that can catch passes out of the backfield. And they were trying to use him with Dontrell Hilliard last year, and then he injured himself. But at the end of the day, I think that you're looking at an Elijah Mitchell, Jeff Wilson, a Raheem Mostert type of running back that could provide you some explosiveness, can be there in the pass catching, can be there in the pass blocking. He doesn't have to come off the field, but he also provides you a different element this year than Derrick Henry can provide you in certain situations. So I don't think it's a waste of a pick. And I know that's a big leap. You got Derrick Henry, but you have Derrick Henry on the contract at the end. It's better for you to have alternatives compared to Derrick Henry to give him relief and provide him relief for the later years or later months, especially. To me, it was just all about fixing John Robinson's mistakes. And maybe they fixed the wrong mistakes, and you can argue that all you want. And I wouldn't really disagree. But Hassan Haskins, you said it. He's kind of like a dud. He's a vanilla. He's regular. He's just
fine as a roster guy, but he's just there.
Yeah, and so they don't have anybody behind Derrick Henry.
I see Spears as almost more of a correction for Darrington Evans, though. Like, I think he's going to give them what they thought they were going to get from Darrington Evans, and obviously did not. But I think that's kind of
he's a lot better prospect than Darrington Evans. I just want to throw that out there with it to everybody because I see that unfair comp a lot. Darrington Evans' problem is that he'd rather play video games than play the game of football. So let's be honest. Again,
I'd say Evans has a better top gear. I'd say Spears is way more elusive than Evans ever was, and way better between the tackles. Spears, to me, is really impressive in that he's way more powerful than you'd think for a guy of his size. Like, he can definitely bang it up in the tackles. He will pull defenders. He's not going to go down at first contact very easily. And he's got like phenomenal contact balance. So I think there's a lot of things to like about Spears as a talent.
Bama Brad brings it up. Evans was like 4 years ago, wasn't it? Yes.
It's been a minute,
John Robinson. Listen, John Robinson's mistakes have not gone away because they tried. I don't know what they were trying to really accomplish with the Hassan Haskins pick because he's not really Darrington Evans and he's not really Derrick Henry. I don't know what they were trying to accomplish, but they've been trying to fix these issues John Robinson has, and now, they thought they had it solved with Dontrell Hilliard, then he gets injured, so, it is what it is. Moving on, 3rd round pick, no 4th round pick. 5th round is Josh Wiley.
Why
is it Wiley? Okay.
Wiley,
is that definitive? Wiley?
Yeah.
Okay. Boy, people did not like that pick either.
I'm shocked, though, honestly.
Well, people are box score scouting. And so someone did this in one of my other chats that was talking about, some receiving threat. He only has like 200 yards receiving or something like that. Like, instead of, that's what they go to. Here's the thing. Here's what I'm going to say to everybody. Maybe I should have said this at the beginning. And this kind of goes into our vision thing. We have been talking about this whole time that they have to find, it's not that they have to, but they should, if they were smart, find a running mate for Chig Okonkwo, a guy that could do both. Now, Josh Wiley is not exceptional right now at both because he played at a new weight last year, so he's kind of learning his new body, his new weight, put on like 20 pounds or 30 pounds or something.
Yep.
Not a lot of weight. But that's what the coaching's for, and that's why you're a 5th round pick. He's going to be coached up to do the things that he needs to do, and I think he's going to have a quick progression. And what the NFL has told you about these wide receivers that we all love, they didn't love them as much as we did, and that means that we have to reset our expectations now after the draft. Listen, maybe A.T. Perry goes off like crazy, but there's a reason he fell to the 6th round, and other people passed on him too, not just the Tennessee Titans. Same thing with
And
Tyler Scott. Tyler Scott got passed around for almost 5 complete rounds.
yeah, and
Almost.
I think there was certainly word out there that the NFL was not super high on this receiver class. I just think it almost fans and media both almost can't help but rank receivers highly because it's such a fun position to scout and form opinions on and all these other things that like it's like candy. It's a lot easier to put a wide receiver up higher on your board than it is to put a guard or a defensive tackle or whatever.
Right.
So I think that the media and fans are almost always going to be higher on receivers than
And
the
of course, the
NFL is.
Tennessee Titans fan base is thirsty for receivers. So, of course, all the Tennessee Titans
Yeah,
fans have done is
starving.
watch wide receivers. I mean,
Right.
there wasn't a wide receiver you could name that at least there wasn't like 10 people that jumped in and said, oh, their tape's good, or I didn't like this game, or this and that. Guys, the most impressed I've been with the Tennessee Titans fan base on a particular group draft position groups. D Good says George Kittle was a 5th round pick. And I know that apparently Rich Eisen said this is George Kittle. The tape connection for there isn't me. I get the connection of a 5th round pick, and a San Francisco guy and a San Francisco guy. I get that. But I would settle down Rich Eisen. I would settle down. But I don't know. I liked it when I heard it. It wasn't the tight end I wanted to hear. I mean, I obviously wanted Payne Durham at the time because I figured they were going tight end. I thought
Mhm.
maybe Xavier Hutchinson would have been high on their board right there too, but apparently not. And I could also saw Jalen Duncan there, which we'll talk about Jalen Duncan in a second. But I do really like the pick. It adds to the Tennessee Titans for 2024. You have to have 2024 vision for the Tennessee Titans if you want to understand their draft strategy. Jalen Duncan, do you have anything on Josh Weil or Wiley? I'm going to call him
Yeah,
Weil the whole fucking time.
yeah. I think so. To me, tight end, I like drafting athletes. And once again, as with most of this class, Wiley's an above average athlete. I think, was 80, or he was like right at 90, or like a 9.0 RAS. So certainly above average at 6'7", 250, running 4.69 is really good. And then if you look at the tape, he moves like a wide receiver, right? Like he's got like the fluidity of movement that you can tell he was a converted wide receiver that turned into a tight end. He's not like a stiff athlete at all. He's got some movement to him, and there's definitely evidence of him being able to go up and win on jump balls with his height and everything like that. So I think there's a lot to like about this pick, and if he can really improve, add some more strength, he only got up to 250 in his final year at Cincinnati. I think he was playing at like 230 before that. So if he can continue to add strength and mass to his frame, I think he could turn into a good blocker. And honestly, the comp, I saw somebody else, so I can't take credit for it, but someone comped him to Austin Hooper. And honestly, that really kind of fits from what I've seen of Wiley compared to Hooper, more smooth than sudden or explosive, but just a smooth athlete, big, strong, contested catch winner. And if he can give you anything close to what Austin Hooper gave you last year, that's a huge win in the 5th round of the draft. So I like the pick. I think he fits. He's a good complement to Chig, who is really your kind of explosive, more of a big play guy at tight end. I think he's a really nice compliment. I like the pick. It's a deep tight end class. I think Wiley goes probably day 2 in a normal tight end class because this tight end class was ridiculous.
Yeah, I wish I could find, and I talked about this with Stoney the other day, and I could not go back and find it. But there was a graph on Twitter circling right around the day of the draft and day 3 of the draft of when to draft tight ends and when's the best time to do it. And it always said day 3 is the best time to draft tight ends, and you draft athletes. And it showed all
Mm-hmm.
this cluster of dots and everything. So there's a really, really good chance that Josh Wiley is going to be a lot better than what people think. And I think a lot better in year 1. I think they'll use him specifically in red zone packages. That's a place where you would want to use his impressive catch radius, his impressive hands is right then and there. Jalen Duncan, oh man, people did not like this pick either.
I'm shocked at that too, honestly. And
uh,
I know at this point it was just receiver, like everyone was in like receiver mania at that point,
yeah,
and nobody was thinking clearly. But
I think that there's two ways to look at the Jalen Duncan pick. Obviously, it is building through the trenches, but this is a guy that was one of the many prospects that everybody got wrong outside of the NFL draft and the NFL team rooms, because he was a day two, early day three, like round 4 kind of guy. Now, supposedly penalties, lots of penalties, and the sacks from last year, and there are questions about his dedication to training. Now, when he came to the Senior Bowl, and he was a little bit light in the britches, but he was good. He had a good week of Senior Bowl. I believe it was Tic Tac Titan say that he had a very bad Senior Bowl. He did not. Now, I wouldn't say that he had an excellent Senior Bowl. I think he just had a very average for the offensive line Senior Bowl week. And then he put on weight at the combine. And when he measured in, I got in our group chat and I said, hey, I like that he put on weight. And I hope that he maintains that weight, because here's why. Because he was under 300 pounds trying to play left tackle, which we know that's probably not the best way to probably go. So if he can maintain his athleticism, which he did at the combine, at that weight, that is a good sign for whoever gets him. And then he goes and does the O-line Masterminds weekend. I thought he came off really well in that. But what I want to point to is where he may fit on this offensive line. And I think you are looking at a future right guard or a future right tackle. I think left tackle is not where you want to put him personally. He may progress differently. But what I like the most, Mike, is that in his Zoom interview, he talks about the extensive time he spent with Coach Haas, because the Senior Bowl, obviously, top 30 visit. I think he had an informal at the combine or something like that. And then I think he also had virtual, is technically what he was saying, I think, in his interview. So he had a lot of touch points. But he loved the vibe from Coach Haas, and he loved the plan that Coach Haas has already give him to start studying and learning and doing. I think the questions about maturity are oftentimes pretty spot on and should be listened to. But I think this particular kid, I think he's here and ready to be something, not this year, unless forced to by injuries, but be something next year for someone on this team. And I think that NPF needs to watch his back.
yeah, I think so I think Duncan is interesting because I expected him to be a lot better this final year than what he was. I think going into this season, I know we in our group chat we're talking about him as a potential first round guy, right? Because I mean,
very early he was like a first round kind of guy.
And so I think he had a disappointing final year. He gave up like double the amount of sacks and pressures that he had his previous season. So I don't know if he was playing with injury or if something happened that kind of had him off of his game, but he clearly took a step back. And look, that's really odd as a 4-year starter, for your 4th year to be by far your worst season as a starter, besides like maybe his very first season as a freshman. But again, Titans go back to like this guy's a former Titan, like our top 50 recruit or top 150 recruit, I think, in the country coming out of high school. And then he started 4 seasons at left tackle in the Big Ten. And he tested as a really high end athlete, and the athleticism shows immediately on tape. Like he is a super easy mover, really good balance, all that stuff. So a ton of tools to work with. I just think he may be in a situation where coaching, he needs the right coach to reach him. And, Vrabel seemed to be, he raved about that in-person visit, saying it was awesome, that was one of the best visits. And if they get the guy that was on that visit, they'll be very happy. So it seems like maybe there's a good connection between them already. And to me, sometimes that's all you need is if you're a good athlete and you've got the raw goods and you can get hooked up with a coach that you click with and that can motivate you, push your right buttons, get you to be better than you were at your previous stop, then that's a good bet, especially in the 6th round. Like I think he's definitely going to make the roster, which I think, isn't always a guarantee for a 6th round pick. And I think he's going to have a chance to be like a backup swing tackle, a backup swing, guard. I think you could see him as like in that utility backup spot, I think at some point. So I definitely think that this was a worthwhile pick because I think he's going to end up being a starter for them at some point. I really do.
You don't have
And
that
where
kind of
that is, I don't know.
pedigree, I think, as long as he works through it for it. I don't
Yeah.
think you could pass up on that kind of pedigree in the 6th round.
If he'd had a better senior season, I think he goes day 2 for sure.
Yeah. And everybody's like, well, he's allowed the most sacks in the Big Ten. And like, so fucking what? Like,
But
I
that
mean,
was an outlier season for him
yeah,
too,
right.
right?
Yeah. I mean, it's an outlier season. It was from 4 sacks to 10, I believe. So, and it's who cares? Like, so there was one bad season that he had, and now everybody wants to poo-poo on him and think that's the real season. We'll see. Like, I think that was a really good pick, and it was an obvious pick if you paid attention to their visits and what they talked about and what they wanted to do. A not so obvious pick, Colton Dow. That was out of all the wide receivers I think everybody's talked about, is the one I didn't recognize. Did not recognize that name. He didn't come to the combine. I don't remember seeing his name on any kind of like official visits, but apparently he had a really great local visit. He has some questionable, or not questionable, some interesting choices in facial hair and actual hair, and the way that he takes pictures is pretty hilarious. I know that everybody's going to fall in love with him, but I kind of do think that like he's fast, because if you watch the UT game, because he's got at least 2 full games that I've watched on YouTube, the UT Martin versus UT and Boise State versus UT Martin.
Mm-hmm.
He's got potential. What I've noticed about the UT Martin offense is like as soon as they snap the ball, that quarterback was already locked on to wherever he's going to throw, and that's where he's going to throw it. He ain't reading shit on the field. But there's
the Tennessee offense.
Yeah, he blew by some people and everything. I think that his technique is really good. He's a big Emory Hunt speaks very highly of him.
Yeah.
Zierlein went back and watched some film and speaks very highly of him.
Mm-hmm.
I will say this. It's like you're taking Nick Westbrook's dependability with a little bit of like 90% of Racey McMath's athleticism and putting him into this guy, which sounds great in theory, but let's not, go completely nuts like everybody is always want to do. Same with Jacob Copeland, same with Kearis Jackson. Let's just slow it down and let's hope that they prove to be viable options at wide receiver.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no guarantee that Colton Dowell makes the roster. I mean, that's
this roster maybe.
I mean, I think he probably does, because I think he had some value on special teams too, as I understand it. He's a gunner, but I think Emory Hunt had him as his number 5 X wide receiver in the class, like just specifically for X's, which is like eyebrow raising for sure. I do think, look, again, he's a major, like, mega athlete type. Like, I think he was in the top 3 percentile as far as RAS goes, 6'2", 215, or 6'3", somewhere in there, and ran 4.4 and jumped over 40 inches in the vertical. So mega athlete, and had some production to go with it. Like, I think he was banged up his previous 2 years at UT Martin, but had a 1,000-yard season. Was super productive against Tennessee in the biggest game of his career.
Really good against man coverage. I put up the stats. I think I haven't wrote about Colton Dow, but if you subscribe to Stack in the Inbox and you have access to the wide receiver tool, you can go in there and you can look at the stats. But really, really good man stats.
Yeah, coverage. Which I think is a really great starting point for any wide receiver. And look, we'll see what happens with him, but I as a 7th-round dart throw, I like it.
Yeah. Okay. So that carries us to Will Levis, because the reason the Tennessee Titans had to wait to the 7th round to draft a wide receiver is because they pretty much traded up for Will Levis. I've changed my opinion on some things of Will Levis, but let me just throw this out there right at the top. I hope that he proves me wrong, but I have zero faith that he will. But I do have to say it's not going to be because of what I perceive to be a big old giant goober of a person. It's going to be because he just didn't, the skills, what was shown on tape, those skills did translated to the NFL. Like, what the bad stuff you saw on tape in 2022 is who he actually was. Because I have to say that I was wrong about Will Levis the person, Will Levis the leader, Will Levis the whatever you may want to call him. This dude is fucking smart. He has a great head on his shoulder. I am shocked. The story I read this morning, I can't remember whose article it was, whether it was I think it was the ESPN article you shared, where he wrecks his car in the morning of the ACT, calls the tow truck, easy for me to say, calls his parents, goes and takes the ACT like nothing happened, and aces the ACT.
Ran to the school, who comes in out of breath.
Like, this guy is cool as a cucumber, not shaken up by anything. I love what they did about his pre-draft process, where they had him come in and they had him cut up his own film of mistakes and come in and do it and show it and all these things. I feel like a lot of quarterbacks would just be like half-ass that part, but that isn't. I mean, apparently he went full into it. He's not afraid to say what went wrong. The way that he got the team captain within being there for 8 days, the way people gravitate towards him. I have to say that the Will Levis the person, Will Levis the leader, I totally got wrong. So I will. That's why I put the Kentucky banner up, because like, I'm rooting for me to be wrong. I am rooting for Will Levis, not just because he's a Tennessee Titans franchise quarterback, but because he's an easy guy to root for.
Yeah, I will say that I don't think I knew as much about his personal background as what I've found out over the last few days. Like, obviously, we researched all these guys extensively and watched them play and watched the tape and all that stuff. But I didn't read. I wasn't certainly reading every single Will Levis article on the internet like I have over the past week or so. But that is the thing that has really struck me as I've continued to research him. I mean, the guy he graduated high school, 4.0 student, went to Penn State, gets a finance degree,
3 years.
In 3 years with a 4.0, goes to Kentucky, gets his master's in finance with a 4.0.
I would have never believed it. I thought for sure that was just a fucking, like, I was reading an Onion story, because I did not believe it.
Which the crazy thing is, it's because he's got this persona, right, which stems from the TikTok stuff where he does these goofy videos with the banana peels,
and find out those are just like little one-offs,
right? And I think more that I've researched about him, I think it's all a plan that he was trying to get his name out there, and trying to gain some fame and stuff like that for marketing purposes later on. Because if you research his family, like, his family are like big wigs, like big shots on, like, I think it's marketing and branding and that sort of thing.
And sports apparel too.
Yeah. So they are a very business oriented family, and I think this has all been kind of I guess I'm trying to find the right word to say, but I think this has all been a planned barrage on this TikTok thing to get his name out there, to make him a little bit more famous in non-football circles, right? Because I think they want him to be
like a million views on average or something. I'm like, Jesus,
pretty massive. Like, I'm not a TikTok guy. I'm too old for that. So
yeah, I'm with you.
It's so I have not viewed them, but apparently he's a big deal on there. But I think, to me, all this seems more calculated now than this like goofy, like, lunk guy that I think I kind of viewed him as, just from a casual viewing experience of his personality. Now, from a football standpoint, I still have the same concerns, right? Like
Right.
the lack of feel in the pocket, the hot and cold accuracy stuff, decision making, the turnovers. Like I looked at the turnover rate for Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Will Levis, and Anthony Richardson. And Will Levis was turning the ball over basically once. One out of every 29 passes was an interception. Stroud and Young were in the once every 69, once every 80 something passes was intercepted. So that is a real problem. But I also think, and I wrote about this today in that long section on Will Levis for my PK article, was he also played in an offense that isn't necessarily tailored to the video game numbers, and it isn't made to be easy, right? Like the reason that almost all college and high school teams run the spread is that it is easy to teach, and it is something that everyone comes up playing now. It is easy to put up big offensive numbers out of it. It's why like Ohio State and Bama run this offense. It's very hard to stop. Kentucky did not run that offense. They ran a pro style offense. They basically ran the Rams offense that Liam Cohen installed when he got there the year that Levis arrived. And then, by the way, the Titans still use a lot of the Rams terminology because Matt LaFleur
I don't
installed
know.
that offense.
I
Well,
mean,
yeah,
we have to talk
we'll
about that
see.
today.
Yeah, we'll get into that a little bit. But either way, I feel like the transition for Levis will be easier to the pro
Mhm.
game. And I think that some of the reason that his stats were not as impressive as Stroud or Young is simply that his offense wasn't giving him as many easy layups as what those
You
guys were.
when you're
And
in Kentucky and you often find yourself playing from behind, you have to play a little bit of hero ball because that's the kind he's not the guy that's going to give up. And I'll say this because a lot of I think D Good brings it up. Yeah, Liam Cohen talks really highly of him. And I just kind of
yeah,
chalked it up as
Jordan Palmer.
yeah. I just kind of was like, well, that's what everybody says. But I go back and I read. I think it was Stephen Ruiz's article where he compares him
Yeah,
Justin Herbert and Liam Cohen's in there. Liam Cohen does not hold back against the Kentucky offense. The
not at
players
all.
that he is literally going to coach, some of the players that he is going to coach this year as offensive coordinator of Kentucky, now that he's back after a year of being away over at the Rams, he does not hold back about how they didn't help him out, how the play
They weren't
design sucked, how
running the
this
right
sucked.
routes.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
He
offensive
said
line was terrible.
and that to me, like, let me know is like, I mean, I don't know Liam Cohen the person, but it sounds like he ain't the one that's going to mince words to blow smoke up your ass because he's already trashing these kids essentially that he's
Yeah,
going to have to go
yeah,
stare in the face. And it's like, I guess he's just going to tell them the same thing, obviously, but you usually keep that behind closed doors. So, like, and then the turf toe was kind of new. I knew that he had hurt himself in his
yeah.
throwing hand and got banged up. I didn't know the turf toe was an issue until
So,
recently either, and
and
that affects shit as well.
and my understanding with that is that not only did he have the toe injury, he also had a shoulder injury, and that he was having to get both of those shot up before every game to even be able to make it through
And
the
he
game.
watches Scarface before every game, which I thought was pretty interesting as well.
And and I'll say this about Levis as well. If you go look at his game log for 2022, he gets hurt. Like all these injuries happen basically on the same play, and he's talked about it
Mhm.
multiple times against Ole Miss. And you look at his first four games. Now, look, the level of competition is lower in those first four games because they only played one SEC school, Florida, and they played Miami of Ohio, Youngstown State, and Northern Illinois, which Northern Illinois is actually a pretty good non-Power 5 school, but still not as high a level of competition. But he goes for 303 yards, 202 yards, 377 yards, 303 yards. He has 10 touchdowns passing, 4 interceptions, and then 2 rushing touchdowns in those first 4 games. And then the rest of the season, I mean, he only had 9 touchdowns after that. I think it's pretty clear. And look, level of competition again, like the rest of the schedule was all SEC and Louisville in the bowl game. But I think it's pretty clear that the injury was hampering him to some degree. And it completely cut off his rushing. Like he stopped running the football at all after this point, and that is a part of his game that is a plus. The other thing I think we need to point out with Levis that maybe I missed the first time around with him is I think I may have been a little bit hard on him from an accuracy standpoint. I think he's actually a more accurate passer than I gave him credit for initially because I found this study. It's from statsbomb.com, and I'll have to tweet out the link, but I've referenced it a few times in relation to CJ Stroud because Stroud scored absolutely off the charts and over expected, which is basically taking completion percentage compared to air yards. And basically, it's as you throw the ball further field, obviously your expected completion percentage drops. It's a more difficult throw. So if you're throwing a screen behind the line of scrimmage, you're supposed to hit that like 98% of the time. If you're throwing a bomb 40 yards downfield, maybe 20 or 30% of the time, something like that. But they compare that, they basically strip that all down, look at all the attempts and provide the data. And if you look at Will Levis, he was a plus 4.2% completion percentage over expected, which was second only to Stroud. He finished well above Young and way above Richardson.
And he's got the S2 score to back it all up as well.
And he's got the 93 S2 score. So have I kind of talked myself into Will Levis a little bit? Maybe so, but there are real bits and pieces here for us to go back and look in, 3 or 4 years when we really know what kind of player he is and say, okay, if he hits, should we have seen this coming? This is the stuff that we should have seen coming. And this is the stuff that we should point out now because no quarterback is a guarantee. That Ruiz article you mentioned was great because it mentioned Justin Herbert. It mentioned Josh Allen. It mentioned all these guys that had major questions and how few quarterbacks actually have zero questions coming out in the draft. So I think Levis has real concerns. There are real issues in his play that will need to be ironed out, namely the turnovers and the sacks. Like those are the two things you just can't do. But if he can clean some of that stuff up, and we'll see if he can, everything else is there. Like to me, he's got the best release, like the best throwing motion in the class. I think he's got, him and Richardson have about the same arm strength to me. But it's elite. Like Levis and Richardson will walk in the NFL and be top 5 arms, like from a arm strength, arm talent standpoint. And then you've got the 6'4", 230, the running ability, the fact that he's sub 4.7, in high school. I mean, this guy has a full toolbox. It's just about putting it all together. And like, we'll see what the coaching staff can do with him. But man, there's a lot of reasons to be excited about this.
Right.
Actually.
I mean, when you hear about the stories and you learn about Will Levis, the person, it kind of clicks. You're like, oh, well, now I know why the Titans really liked him because he's kind of just a Titans guy.
Yeah. I could see him, broing out with Vrabel a little bit.
It will be this particular draft class to me is going to be such an interesting one to look back on because there's so many outliers at every position. Skoronski's arms, the athleticism and inaccuracy of Anthony Richardson, the uber athletic, the uber accurate but maybe sort of slow S2 score of CJ Stroud, Bryce Young's size, Will Levis's just all of his myriad of issues that show up on tape. You talk about the wide receivers. A lot of them are way small and skinny and, play in systems that aren't NFL friendly, apparently. And like, there's just so many players and storylines to watch out this draft class. It'll be really interesting to see what we can look back at as guys who evaluate the prospects and evaluate the draft. Go back and reevaluate our process and adjust accordingly and see what we missed and see what we need to look at further down the road. But speaking of evaluation, with evaluation comes conviction. And I think this is the good conversation to have, by the way. But before we start this, because it looks like it's going to be a pretty long podcast, Bluegrass Beverages, you know what? We're just going to drink to the draft party you guys put on. Thanks again to Bluegrass Beverages. Thanks for being a sponsor. We had such a great time. You guys were great sponsors. Hendersonville, Tennessee. They have been around since the 70s, been around longer than me and Mike. Go there, your one-stop shop for all your alcohol needs. head to Bluegrass Beverages, join the in crowd because there will be some big time future contests, and you want to be a part of it. You want to get that advance notice. Okay. So the Tennessee Titans, because there's a good discussion to be had about conviction. Because our thing has been, if he is your guy, go up and get him. And instead of getting him at 11 or getting him at 3, so let's go through the stage here. The Tennessee Titans decided that they were going to try and get C.J. Stroud at number 3. It was the worst kept secret, whether that's Mike Vrabel's fault or just basically everybody kind of knew before Diana Rossini went wild anyway that they were probably going to trade up to 3. There's all those connections were being made before she went up there, but it got hot and heavy. Then obviously C.J. Stroud was drafted. Tennessee Titans pulled their offer from the Arizona Cardinals. Albert Breer reported it. Diana Rossini reported it, then deleted her tweet, but they pulled it. So that means they did not like Anthony Richardson at number 3 overall. They did not like Will Levis at number 3 overall. It seemed to be C.J. Stroud was number 1 on their board. Then Will Levis falls, and there they are at 11, and they take Peter Skoronski, which that tells you that while they do that they have Peter Skoronski above Will Levis on their big board. Then the free fall continues, and then you hear the rumors that Tennessee Titans try to trade up, specifically the Buffalo Bills spot, but they had their own player falling, and they wanted Dalton Kincaid over a trade back. Then I have heard that the Eagles were looking to trade back, but Nolan Smith fell to them, and they could not pass up on Nolan Smith. So it seems to me the teams at the back of the round, because there were multiple teams trying to trade up. So multiple teams, we don't know if they were all for Will Levis, but I would say at least one other team was looking at Will Levis for that 5th-year option. Multiple teams called different teams and tried to trade up, and nobody would trade back. So what that tells you is that the teams in the second half or this back half of this first round had guys that they wanted, and they wanted them on the 5th-year option. The Tennessee Titans did not get Will Levis, not for lack of trying, on the 5th-year option. And then they trade up at 33, and all they really, truly give up in the big scheme of things is a few spots and a 2024 third. Where do you lie on the conviction scale? Because we had questions, me and you, we debated, we talked, not with each other, with other people, but we said that is it really conviction to trade up and get your guy in the second round as the same conviction over there? But it's not for a lack of trying. It's maybe for a lack of not overpaying. But where do you lie on that now?
Yeah, I'm really torn on this because to me,
it's a hard one to land on.
If the Titans were convinced that Levis was like a really, really, really sure bet to be a franchise quarterback, they would have taken him at 11. They would not have taken the risk, and they may have even traded up for him, right? They would not have taken the risk because no one expected him to fall all the way down, except for you. But nobody really expected him to fall into the second round.
Now Ross Tucker, Jeff Schwartz are trying to jump in on my claim that they were the ones that were said that he was going to fall out of the second round. Like, no, only this guy did.
Yeah. I never heard them say that. So I will say, I was shocked. I was shocked that he fell all the way out. Like I figured Tampa Bay or Minnesota would jump on him in kind of the middle to late sections of the first round if he did get past the Titans. So, to me, that says that they're not all the way in on him as a prospect. Like they were willing to move heaven and earth for C.J. Stroud, right? Like we know that price was going to be outlandish to get up to 3 to get him, and they were willing to do it from all reports. So to me, that means they had a much higher grade on C.J. Stroud. So, I guess because
you had the example of the Ravens passing on Lamar Jackson to get Mark Andrews, but they had a more willing trade partner to trade up at 32. Like when Mello first brought that up, Canadians, they drink their bag out of milk. So my immediate or drink their milks out of bags. My immediate response to anything that a Canadian says is to immediately disagree with it. But the more I think about it, the more I'm like, is there really that much of a difference? Because the Ravens just found their willing trade partner, and the Titans couldn't.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know that there's a big difference between him being like the
But we both
31st
agree
pick or
they had
the
a first round
33rd.
grade on him, right?
Yes, I definitely think
Okay.
they had a first round grade on him. And maybe look, it could have just been that they had Skoronski as like a top 5 player in this class. They felt like they couldn't pass on him. They might have had Levis at like 15th, which is still a really high grade for a quarterback. But could you justify passing up your 5th rated player for your 15th?
Yeah.
And it seems to me that Carthon's MO, for better or worse, is that he's going to follow his board, and he's
Roll
not
the
going to
dice, play the
reach.
board.
He's not going to reach for positional need. He's just going to take the best player that he can get. And look, to me, usually that strategy is going to be a winner. That's that you don't want to reach for need, because that's how you end up with mistakes. That's how you end up with, Corey Davis at number 5 overall. And I think that's not a bad trait to have. But with quarterback, I'm so conflicted on quarterback, because quarterback, there are examples, Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson and, Russell Wilson, other guys, Dak Prescott, who have fallen out of the first round, or were never even expected to go in the first round and were selected and ended up being stars, right? Like, I mean, those guys are all different levels of stars, but, high end starting quarterbacks. So Levis could turn out to be that way, but I don't know. I just so struggle with the idea that, like, we're kind of in on this quarterback. We think he's a good value, but we'll see what happens. But
Because it didn't.
I don't know.
Because it seems to me that if Skoronski wasn't there,
Yeah,
because they turned in that card with the quickness. I've never
they did.
seen a team in the first
It,
round turn in a card so
they
quick in my
barely went on the
life.
clock. Like, it was
Yeah.
like on the clock, kick is that? Yeah.
So, it seems to me that they would have traded back. It didn't really seem like maybe they had some trade back deals, but it's like kind of like, what the Bills did. They're like, no, my guy's on the board. We're taking my guy. And Skoronski's our guy. And in a trade back, I think they would have drafted Will Levis. And maybe they would have stayed at Will Levis and picked him at 11 if Skoronski wasn't there. But that's just how much they love Skoronski. Should you value the quarterback position a little bit more? Yes. But you also have Ryan Tannehill, so do you have to? Technically not, and you kind of got your cake and you eat it too with Skoronski and Will Levis, and there's no better friend to a young quarterback than offensive lineman that could pass protect.
Yeah.
Because I mean, we saw what he was without that, but now he can sit a year or whatever. I don't know. I'm kind of with you. I struggle where I stand, so I just think there is no perfect answer or no perfect solution to this question right now. But I think there is a good discussion to be had among all parties to try to figure out, is this true? This isn't the highest level of conviction, but there is somewhat of a level of conviction that Will Levis was a guy that they wanted, and obviously they wanted Stroud more, but ultimately it could work out for the better, because you don't know which of these quarterbacks are going to hit, and we'll just have to see. Where does your faith in, because this comes from Andrew King, and I've seen a lot of people say Charles London, and yes, he will be involved because he's obviously quarterback coach, but there's also, you got Pat O'Hara, you have Tim Kelly, you have it's almost like a 3-headed Hydra monster for quarterback development. Where are you on your faith in London and your faith in the staff as a whole to get Will Levis correct for possibly a year or two?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to have a ton of faith, and I guess in London, just because we haven't seen him do it. I mean, we've got 1 year of Desmond Ridder development, as his kind of evidence. So I have no idea really on London. And look, Ridder seemed to play okay. They apparently like him enough to not be ready to move on or try anything else at this point, which they easily could have done. But Kelly, actually, I think his work with Deshaun Watson is strong enough that I actually feel kind of good about Tim Kelly's ability to bring Will Levis along. And you know, Deshaun Watson's a different type of player, but a lot of the same physical tools are there. Strong arm, mobile, good size, running ability, all that stuff. So I think there's certainly a blueprint there. And look, Deshaun Watson came out of Clemson with accuracy concerns, right? Like we look back and look, we'll set aside all the off-field stuff and the fact that he was terrible for the Browns last year. Set aside that for now, because let's just focus on like who he was as a prospect and then who he turned into as a pro. Definitely had questionable accuracy concerns and things like that coming out of Clemson. So that stuff went away immediately in the NFL, and he and Tim Kelly had a great relationship by all reports, and were he credits Kelly significantly for helping his development. And the year that Kelly called plays in Houston was the best season by far that Deshaun Watson has had statistically as a pro. So I think there's reason to believe in Tim Kelly. London, we'll see. Obviously Vrabel likes him, but I think the jury's kind of out in general, but I'm cautiously optimistic.
I think that's a good way to put it. Andrew King also says, look at the Josh McCown video on Will Levis, and there's also a Kurt Warner video on Will Levis.
I need to check those out.
We'll put those out there. We're cutting it short, even though it is over-long. We have a sick kid to attend to.
Yeah.
So before you go, not a grade. Tell everybody what you feel the vision is for 2024 or for this season and beyond.
My feeling is that this is the Derrick Henry and Ryan Tannehill farewell tour. Enjoy your last season with those guys. Hopefully Henry hits some of those yardage and touchdown milestone markers, because I don't think they're going to be here after this season. And they may not make it through the full season, depending on, whether Levis proves to be pretty pro ready or whatever. There's certainly a chance that they could be moved. But to me, I think it appears the plan is we're going to try to compete with basically what we've got in 2023. And then next season, it's going to be rip the Band-Aid off. And here we go with Will Levis and Tajay Spears and this new look Tennessee Titans offense. So that's kind of what it appears to be is the plan.
It's to build and gain momentum heading into 2024 and have certain positions of high value on their draft board replaced with those high values on the draft board in 2024. I agree. It's a farewell tour with lots of money coming ahead, for them to spend, lots of improvements for them still to make. They were never going to be able to solve all their issues in one season, but they did solve enough of them to make considerable headway and improvements over last year. Just real quick, I want to run through the presser just real quick. It seems like Roger McCreary is really focused on getting his body right, his diet right, taking care of his body so he could be like Kevin Byard. Chig Okonkwo and Aaron Brewer may not be allowed to ever speak at a presser again because they really let loose some secrets. And then Ryan Tannehill really got deep into it, and it is all about the offense itself. They want to play fast. Particularly the receivers and the pass catchers sound like they need to get to their spots really quick. And then Aaron Brewer said that it's going to be all about up-tempo. And then Tannehill said that there's a huge difference, a huge change, a big difference, and a fresh outlook on this offense, a fresh mind in the offensive room. Totally, he said that's like essentially what he alluded to is like 90% new and like 10% carryover, which doesn't really help the Will Levis thing. But Will Levis is super smart. So, there you go, right?
Yeah,
so
Will Levis reportedly picked up a really hard offense in like a week at Kentucky. Yeah. So, I'm not worried about Levis picking it up.
So we'll talk about all that next week because that will play into more of it. Thanks for joining us. This has been Football Under the Efforts. We're sponsored by Bluegrass Beverages. Mike Herndon at Mike Herndon NFL on Twitter. PaulKarski.com is where you need to subscribe to read all of his written works every Wednesday. My name is Zach Lyons, stackingtheinbox.com, $4 a month. And we got some big things coming down the pipe, an announcement coming to you soon, either today or tomorrow, about some future events and activities going on at the site. StackingTheInbox.com, $4 a month. Follow me on Twitter at FWordsPod. This has been Football and Other F Words, and you have just been effed.